Hello everyone and welcome back to Fantasy Kingdom, my new park in Parkitect. On to episode 2 then, as we get the series up and running. We're working on the entrance building in this one today. Didn't take any reference images or anything off Google for this. I literally just started building and wanted to see what I could come up with. Which really I find a lot more challenging. I find it easier just to sort of copy things, but I wanted something original here, but still with different sort of ideas from real parks as well. So it sort of has a bit of a Disneyland Paris vibe to it, where there's a big hotel going over the entrance, but I didn't want it to be a hotel, obviously, and I didn't want it to be a exact copy of that building. So I started working on something that I thought would look good. I'm fairly happy with how this one turns out in the end, although it was a lot of trial and error with this, building things, changing them, and I even had to move the building around a couple of times, because the main problem is sort of building outside the park bounds, but we'll get back to that when it comes up. So right now I'm working on a custom roof for the spires, using his better letters technique from the fantasy letters pack. And I swear to God, this whole park is going to end up being just built out of these letters. I'm using them for everything so far, but they're really handy for detailing. So yeah, that's what we're going for, and it took quite a few attempts to get them looking right. Now these are very performance heavy. You can see once they're all in place, the sort of game lag's already a bit going over them. So I thought about taking them out and doing maybe bigger ones so it doesn't use up so much of the power, but I just decided to keep them like this in the end, because it's going to be a detailed park, so my computer's just going to have to accept that and deal with it, I'm afraid. And obviously we're using several different colours. I do change the colours anyway to an even reddier to red. Basically I changed them to red, and just having some slightly lighter and some slightly darker to give it that textured feel, which I like to do with these. I'm not great at doing things like this, to be honest, especially in Parkitect. Like, this is something that's a lot easier in Planet Coaster, because you've basically got an advanced move tool that can turn things around and put them however you want, whereas Parkitect, they just sort of go where they want, and you have to really manipulate them to get it how you want. Well, with these I've built them all off grid, so that's why it took a little bit more time to get them in. But obviously there's a similar sort of roof in the pirate mod, but I didn't want to go for that for the main reason that I couldn't get the steep spire with those roofs, so it wouldn't have really been what I was going for here. You know, maybe I should have just kept it simple and just had the spires, but what the hell, you know, we're going big with this one. I think it looks good, so yeah, it is worth doing. Obviously, like, it did take a long time to get it all set up, like, especially, like, it's so much easier when you can build stuff on grid and just hold Alt and B, but they didn't want to go in the places that I needed them to go, doing it like that. So yeah, we just place them all in off grid, and I don't care to think how many pieces there probably is just on this one spire alone, but you know, there's 5 of these, so that's just how it goes. I think the main difficulty with this build was I completely forgot. I thought, right, I'm going to build everything outside the park before we start it, like in scenario editor, when you can still build outside the park. And then when it comes to doing the entrance and the weenie and all that, and everything else in the park, obviously, then I'll just build inside the park and it'll be fine. Little did I think, well, hang on a minute, the entrance is over the park bounds. So, in order to build half the entrance without the actual little entrance units sticking out, I'm going to have to build outside the park bounds. So I went back to the cheat mod. Unfortunately, it was working fine to start with, and I used the cheat mod to build outside the park bounds, which was, like I say, fine to start with. We then come under, well, we had a bit of a problem when I had sort of done half the build, then moved it inside the park so that I could work with it without the cheat mod on, because the cheat mod had started lagging and slowing things down to like 11 FPS, like it was doing in my Six Flags build, which I didn't even really need it for that much in that park, because the park was so huge anyway. But it just wouldn't behave. At one point it wouldn't work at all, so yeah, I was basically fighting with it just so I could build outside the park bounds. I wish in sandbox mode there was literally just an option where you could build outside the park bounds if you wanted to turn it on and off. That would be super handy. Something that they have implemented into the game now, and I don't know if this has always been there or if I've just not noticed it before, but you can go in settings and you can select a button to turn construction anarchy on and off. That saves me so much time, honestly. Thank you so much to the developers or whoever's implemented that, because it's so handy. Literally, when I want to build something off grid or use construction anarchy, I just press C and it flicks between the two. It's so much easier than going into the mods, finding it, disabling it, enabling it. So yeah, that really is a game changer for me. So yeah, I'm very happy about that. Back to what we're doing then. All the, like you can see, all the detailed roofs, spire things are in. Obviously I wasn't going to do it for the whole roof because that would just be a silly amount of pieces, so we just used the normal pirate roofs there. But I didn't like how this looked in the end, so I did change it anyway. But for now we're just going to work on some of the detailing of the front of the building. So putting in the windows, you know, the little window flower boxes, lots of better fancy letters again for the detailing on the outside of the building. Like I say, I'm probably going to build everything in this park out of them letters, because they just work super well as like small details. Obviously they're resizable and recolorable as well, which always helps. To be honest, most things in this game are. Yeah, for the actual windows themselves, just one of the modded windows, possibly from Shy Guys. I'm not sure, I can't remember what set they're from, but something like that. And then I just add some sort of fantasy-ish style big bricks down the bottom for a bit of detailing there. Using the adventure borders as well for the borders. And the sort of trim at the top of the roof there is another letter. I think it's the letter Y, but I think that's from the pirate pack. But yeah, just trying out some different ideas there for the shutters. Is that the right word? In the end, just went for the TNT crate sunken into the wall. Makes some quite nice window shutters there. We don't put these on all the windows because I wanted a bit of variation on the building, so just went for that on the first one and used the standard lamps there for the lights. To be honest, it's all pretty basic stuff. Just trying to find things that look fairly good together. I use this. I mean, it's very minute detailing, you can't see it that well unless you zoom right in, but it does add a bit of texture to the wall. I'm using this, I think it's from the ancient Egypt pack. and it's just like a wall piece with some hieroglyphics on, but from how you see it in the game, it could just look like a sort of fantasy type design on the wall, and we just sink that in behind some of the other details, like I say, just to add a bit of texture to the wall. So that goes on both of the end pieces, and that leaves us just the ones in the middle and the rest of the walls to work on. This is the point then when I moved the building, so I blueprinted it and put it inside the park because the cheat mod had suddenly slowed down to 11 FPS. So in order to work on it, I needed it to be inside the park fully. So that's what we did here. And it's not the last time I struggle with the mod during this build, because obviously it has to go back in place once it's finished. But we'll get to that as and when. So here I just wanted to try some different ideas with the roof. Started off with this terrible idea of having 4 of these rounded bits. In the end we just have one either side, and then we have the roof building up in the middle, which looks a lot better. The roof there, the round roof there, then is just a shape, just a big cylinder. And yeah, the pieces in the middle, like I see, very simple, just walls building up. And then I decided I want the middle tower to be even taller, and for it to have a bit of a sort of bell tower feel to it as well, nice and fantasy. You know, I love building things like this in the game. Just the little details is what makes it fun, I think. And yeah, the spires are all blueprinted, so I can just move on and off when I need to. Excuse me, struggling to talk there. Where are we then? So, the usual level of professionalism within the commentary here today. At least I haven't rambled on too much about nonsense today, I'd like to think. Trying to keep fairly on topic. So this window is just sort of, well, you can see what it is. It's just sunken into into the wall, really. Yeah, I used that ancient Egypt detailing piece that I was on about before just to cover it up there, just so it looks like a sort of half window type thing, which I think looks rather neat. And then with these ones I wanted a bit of variation, so we use a Shy Guys window, you know, with the slightly different frame and the built-in awning. For some reason, the other small awning, that's the generic in-game one, just doesn't seem to be there anymore. So there's a larger version of it, the longer one, but not the one, you know, that looks kind of like that blue one. It's just not. I couldn't see it there in the detail section, so I just use the other awning for those ones. And for these ones we're having window boxes again, which are custom made window boxes, just using the flowers and some pillars and stuff. Again, pretty basic. And yeah, you can sort of see how the whole thing is coming together now. Like I say, it took a bit of playing about with a few attempts to get things right. It's always difficult when you're just doing something just out of an idea in your head without anything to go by, if you know what I mean. Because you're thinking, well, what would look good there, and then you try something and then it doesn't necessarily look right, and then you try something else. But now looking at it, if I did anything different, I'd probably have these rounded pieces a bit smaller. That's something we could always go back to, but I think for now it's fine. I was trying to add more detailing here with the borders, but it just didn't look right, so I got rid of that, and just kept it basic, and put some more, again using the better letters for details, just putting some on at the top of the roof as well. using those really cool little orb lamps, recoloured. They look great wherever you put them in a fantasy style theme. I was looking earlier at using some of the actual in-game like fantasy vines and stuff to go around the door frames and stuff, but then I just didn't feel that it looked right. I just didn't like how it looked. And then with the fences, I'm moving them all a bit. They still need to be in the right sort of places inside, because I want it to be as if it was real inside, not just, you know, a mess. So we just build walls all around so that the guests are guided where to go. Obviously there will be paths and everything in there as well. And that's almost it, I suppose. Like I say, it does have that Disneyland Paris theme to it as you go in, and there's a hotel there, but like I say, this definitely isn't a hotel, it's just a sort of facade. You never know, like upstairs might have some offices in it or whatever if it is real. But yeah, it's not too important really. It's the main idea of it is that it's just for show. Obviously, something I always sort of overlook with these entrance buildings is how the back's going to look, because you're going to see it just as much on your way out. So I copy a lot of stuff over and do the same on the back as well. Here then just finishing off the tower and various other bits and bobs of the build. I have to say, it's making me want to go to Disneyland Paris. This, I think that might be an idea for next year if we're not allowed back to the USA. Maybe Disneyland and Phantasialand I wouldn't mind going to as well in Germany. Especially with their new themed area and that flying coaster they've got. I'd love to go give that a ride. But yeah, obviously all plans have gone out the window this year. We were meant to go to Cedar Point for a first trip there, so very disappointed not to get that. I was going to go and ride Iron Gwazi as well in Florida, in Tampa, but I don't think that's even opened yet. But yeah, it's hard to plan anything this year. Still got to Fort Park in the end. It's not quite as exciting, but it's still a good day out. But yeah, I mean, now like the theming in the European parks now is on par with, in my opinion, on par with Disney. I've not been to Phantasialand or Europa Park, but just seeing some of the themed lands they're putting into their parks, they're just incredible. Like, the only other place you'd see theme like that is Disney or Universal, and I'd love to go and see some of that myself, because for me it's just as much about the theming and the architecture, well, the fake architecture I suppose, as it is the actual rides and coasters. I'd sooner ride a coaster that's, you know, heavily themed and like a great experience rather than something that's just super intense. Although I do like a good intense coaster as well. Just depends on what it is really. So yeah, I mean, back to the build really. Like I say, we're just trying to get that idea across of the super amazing theming. And like I say, this is probably in Europe, but the location of it doesn't really matter. So it's still going to be very, very different to the Europa Empire Park that I built before. You know, so that's just something to bear in mind as we progress with the project. I guess the next thing to do would probably be the main street. I'm not sure at all how to do that. I don't want it to be too Disney, although it's probably going to end up being quite a lot that way. You know, it's hard to, when you're building a park like this, it's just sort of how it comes together really, because obviously we've done the weenie, which is the centerpiece or castle, whatever it is, in the middle. So as you go into the park, you'll see that, and you want the buildings either side to sort of direct you to that, and that is exactly how Disney do it. But you know, we'll try and come up with something a bit different for some of the buildings, I guess. But that's for next time anyway. That's I don't have to worry about that yet. I mean, this was a big build. This took a long time to get finished. Well worth putting the time in the end. I feel like it was one of the better entrance buildings that I've put together. Looking forward to seeing all you guys' thoughts on it. You know, thanks to everyone that commented and liked the first video of the series. Hopefully this one will be another success for the channel, although I'm not really too bothered about views or subscribers or anything like that. I just like building these things and sharing them, really. I don't think, unless we have another lockdown that lasts forever, I don't think I'll ever have the time to make this a full-time thing, really, anyway. So I give the back of the building a bit of variation here, but carrying on with the same sort of ideas, so to speak. But I think it's always easier once you've sort of built something once, it's easier to replicate it again in a similar way, if you know what I mean. So always the first, getting the actual idea together in the first place is always the more challenging bit. Obviously it does look a lot better from the front than it does at the back, but it just wouldn't have really worked if I had spires on the back as well. And the piece count would be twice as big as it already is, because of the roof. So yeah, I think this is probably the best way to do it. Just have a flat wall along the back, because although yeah, it is still important, it's people are only going to see this on their way out of the park and won't be paying as much attention to it as they will on the way in, I guess. It's always exciting when you roll up to a theme park and see that big entrance building, encouraging you to, to go in. And then, I mean, if it's a Disney park, you then stand in a queue for for a long time to get your tickets or whatever. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say on this one, really. I'll leave you with a slight bit of music and time lapse while we finish it off, and we'll talk near the end. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed watching the build for today, or the rest of the build rather. We're just literally finishing off then with a little bit of realism, because I know some of you like seeing realism and it makes sense to do. Because this would probably be a functioning building as well. Like you can see, I put some things in like toilets and cash machines, first aid and all that. It is an actual functioning building, not just a facade, so we don't have to worry about giving it a massive backstage. Although once it's actually in place, it's quite near to the backstage area that's already there, so we'll try and tie it all in together at some point. But yeah, for this we're just doing some pipes with the shapes, with better shapes, because the Parkitect ones, for some reason there's no flat piece for that gutter or whatever it is. So yeah, that's how it is. So we've got the entrance in place then, and at this point I still needed to build a bit outside the park, so I ended up fighting with the cheat mod and trying to actually play the game and put a sign in for the park while it's running at 11 FPS, which was great fun. But it was the only way to do it by this point, and that I know of anyway. So yeah, just using the fancy letters then for what they're actually intended for, and giving the park a nice sign. I really struggled thinking of where to actually put the sign, so I thought we'll just put it here above the side of the gates. Another thing I've realised is that the gate doesn't reach all the way across that people can get in, but it's not realistic, but it's just going to have to stay like that because it looks alright, okay? So that's it for the build. Thank you for watching, enjoy the cinematic, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers everyone.